On June 27 of 1458, King Alfonso V died at Naples, leaving his son and successor, Ferdinand, to inherit his domains in Naples. The death of King Alfonso marked the end of the Aragonese dream of a Mediterranean empire, and also the hope for a new crusade, in which Skanderbeg was assigned a leading role. The relationship of Skanderbeg with the Kingdom of Naples continued even after Alfonso's death, but the situation had changed. Ferdinand was not as able as his father, and now it was Skanderbeg's turn to help King Ferdinand to regain and maintain his kingdom. From 1461 to 1462, Skanderbeg campaigned in Italy to protect his ally from being overrun by the Angevin dynasty, which claimed the Kingdom of Naples. Upon returning to Albania after securing Ferdinand's throne, the Venetians became hostile to Skanderbeg, and a sort of undeclared war took place. Mehmed II's successes in the east prompted him to launch a new campaign against Skanderbeg. He prepared by sending 3 separate armies into Albania. The first detachment to arrive was Hassan Pasha's force, containing of around 23,000 troops. Upon learning of the Sultan's plans, he immediately marched into Macedonia with an army of around 8,000. Knowing this, Skanderbeg figured out what route Hassan would take, so he chose to encamp in a mountain overlooking the path near Mokra. Skanderbeg anticipated the Ottoman invasion and positioned his Albanian forces on a mountain in the Mokra Valley, where the Ottoman cavalry was expected to pass. Unaware that Skanderbeg was ready to meet him, the Ottomans were slowly marching through the valley. As the valley was narrow, only a quarter of the Ottomans were targeted, specifically the Turkish vanguard. As the large Ottoman force under Hassan Bey entered the valley, Skanderbeg ordered his men to charge directly into the Ottomans, beating their drums and clashing their swords to create the impression of a much larger army than it actually was. The deception worked, and the Ottoman troops, facing what they believed to be a significantly larger enemy, lost their nerve and retreated in disarray. The Albanian forces then pursued the retreating Ottomans, inflicting heavy casualties and taking many prisoners along the way. On the aftermath of the battle, most of the Ottoman soldiers were killed, and Hassan himself was wounded by an arrow, piercing through his right arm. This victory showcased Skanderbeg's mastery of guerrilla warfare, and his ability to use the mountainous terrain to his advantage, forcing the enemy to disperse their troops and become vulnerable to the Albanian hit-and-run tactics. After Hassan's army had been destroyed, Yusuf Pasha, another Ottoman commander, went to defeat Skanderbeg and avenge his colleague. With the Sultan's permission, he marched out with 18,000 troops to Skopje. From there, he marched into Porlog near Tetovo. Yusuf's fate was similar to Hassan's. Skanderbeg attacked and annihilated Yusuf's force, but the Pasha fled, leaving his army behind to be reduced. Karaza Pasha, another of the Sultan's commanders, was lured into Albania for hope of attaining glory, despite his old age. The Sultan yielded 30,000 cavalry to Karaza, who soon marched to Albania. Unlike his 2 compatriots before him, Karaza chose to march through Lower Debra, and not Upper Debra, passing by Ohrid. In the meantime, a scouting force of 4,000 was drawn out ahead of the main army to gather information on the Albanian positions. But the majority of this force was destroyed during an ambush. The Pasha, upon hearing of the disaster, threw a fit of anger, less due to his troops being killed than his plans being foiled. Karaza devised a strategy by which to trick Skanderbeg. He sent several envoys to Skanderbeg condemning his cowardice and calling on him to fight on the open field, instead of hiding in the woods. As the Albanian lord was not in the mood for an actual open battle, Karaza then began to conciliate with the native people, but Skanderbeg, always being well informed, immediately ordered an attack on the Ottoman camp. The attack was so fierce that few knew what was happening, and chaos soon ensued. However, Skanderbeg was not able to achieve his goal of annihilation, but he was still able to do much damage to the Ottoman forces. Karaza immediately escaped with much of his army, and traveled to Constantinople, where he was pardoned by the Sultan for succeeding in preventing the annihilation of his force, which the previous commanders fell victim to. During the 3 battles, up to 20,000 Turks were killed, captured, or wounded. This was the first time that Skanderbeg would win 3 battles in 1 month. In the summer 1463, a huge army under the Sultan's personal command gathered near Skopje. Fearing that the Ottoman Sultan was about to launch a new campaign into Albania, Tanışthopi made urgent requests to establish peace with the Ottomans. Skanderbeg did not want peace, but Tanışthopi's willingness for peace had prevailed and convinced the Albanian lord. The Peace of Skopje was concluded on April 27, 1463, largely out of fear of a resurgent Albanian campaign like the year before. Skanderbeg did not intend to maintain the peace, however, and told the Pope that he would march against the Ottomans whenever the latter ordered him to. Meanwhile, the position of Venice towards Skanderbeg had changed perceptibly because the Venetians entered a war with the Ottomans. The Venetians grew worried after Skanderbeg's peace with the Ottomans and soon set out trying to reconcile with Skanderbeg. On August 20, 1463, an alliance against the Ottoman Empire was concluded between the two. The terms of the alliance were that Venetian contingents and subsidies were to be given to Skanderbeg to help in his future wars against the Ottomans. Venetian ships and auxiliary ships were to be present in Albanian waters to protect the population. If Venice concluded peace with Ottoman Empire, Albania was to be included. Skanderbeg would be given refuge in Venetian territory in case he was driven out of Albania, and his pension arrears would be paid by Venice and not by its proveditors. In November of 1463, Pope Pius II tried to organize a new crusade against the Ottomans, similar to what Pope Nicholas V and Pope Calixtus III tried before. Pius II invited all Christian nobility to join, and the Venetians immediately answered the appeal. In addition to the Venetians, Matthias of Hungary had also joined the crusade, alongside Philip III of Burgundy. With high hopes, a new crusader host was planned to be mustered at the port town of Ancona, where it would sail off to the aid of Albania in the following year. With the prospect of receiving actual support for the first time in his struggle against the Ottomans, Skanderbeg responded to the papal summons for a crusade by breaking the truce and declaring a holy war on the Ottomans. Pius II planned crusade envisioned assembling 20,000 troops in Taranto, while another 20,000 would be gathered by Skanderbeg. However, Pius died in August of 1464, at the crucial moment when the crusading armies were gathering and preparing to march in Ancona. With Burgundy backing out of the crusade at the last moment, and Hungary uninterested in going into a full-on war so soon after its struggle against Austria, Venice and Albania were again left virtually alone to fight the Ottomans. Wanting to go on the offensive before the Sultan could retaliate for breaking the truce, Skanderbeg mustered an army of 12,000 Albanians and 1,000 Venetians, with which he invaded the Ottoman Macedonia. The Albanian lord approached the Ottoman stronghold in the area, the city of Ohrid, which was defended by 15,000 under Sheremet Pasha. Skanderbeg did not have enough troops to assault the fortifications, so he sent a small 500 cavalry detachment, where they were to approach the gates of Ohrid and provoke the Ottomans to attack. They were to throw smoke and dust into the air to irritate the garrison, then they were to feign retreat, where the pursuing Ottoman cavalry would be ambushed by the main Albanian force. This plan worked perfectly. The Ottoman force rode right into the Albanian ambush and were slaughtered. Around 10,000 Ottomans were killed, and 12 Ottoman units were captured, among them Sheremet's son. Skanderbeg then besieged Ohrid for a short time before returning to Albania. The Venetian Senate hailed the campaign as a victory, despite not being able to take Ohrid. The crusade seemed to have gone well for the Christian side, but after Pius' death, the remaining cardinals lost their hope and decided to put the papal galleys in the hands of the Doge of Venice. They also sent the 48,000 gold ducats, which Pius had on hand for the crusade, to Matthias of Hungary. The following spring, another Ottoman provincial army, under the command of Balaban Bada, planned to invade Albania with a force of over 18,000 Akinji raiders. Balaban had been born in Skanderbeg's ancestral domains, and was raised through the Divserm system to become a janissary for the Sultan, much like Skanderbeg. Balaban had known Skanderbeg when they were both in the Ottoman court, but he had always held great animosity towards him. Once he had learned that Skanderbeg had been camped in Vajkal with his men, Balaban began his campaign against the Albanian lord. Skanderbeg had been expecting an Ottoman assault, and ensured that his troops were constantly prepared. The day before the engagement, he formulated his plan of action. He aimed to trick the Ottomans into thinking that his forces were too weak and too frightened to fight. When the Ottomans were finally lured into the valley, under a false sense of security, the Albanian warriors would attack them. The Ottoman forces would then be pursued all the way up to the hills, and the Albanians would stop there, to avoid any counterattack by the Turks. The next day, Balaban came past the hills, but unexpectedly charged at Skanderbeg's forces. Skanderbeg allowed them to approach, before launching his own counterattack. A bloody battle followed, resulting in heavy casualties for both sides. Nonetheless, Skanderbeg and the Albanians held their ground, and were victorious as the Ottomans soon began to flee. Skanderbeg's plan had worked well, and most of Skanderbeg's forces had halted after pursuing the Ottomans up to the hills. However, some of the Albanian officers failed to follow Skanderbeg's orders and continued to doggedly pursue the fleeing Ottomans, but were now unsupported by their infantry. They had charged too far. Balaban turned and expertly managed to rally his fleeing army, speeding across the line on his horse to motivate his soldiers, and leading an attack on the isolated Albanian contingents, which attempted to retreat. In the ensuing conflict, many veteran Albanians were killed or captured. After being ambushed by the fleeing Ottomans, the Albanian officers fled to the top of a hill, where they encountered Ottoman infantrymen. The Albanians had wrongfully believed the infantrymen to be Christians, and were subsequently captured and sent to Balaban. After the Ottomans regrouped, with their newly acquired captives, Balaban ordered his men to march back to Constantinople with the prisoners. Among them were distinguished leaders such as Moise Galemi, Vladan Juria, Nuzak Arianiti, Jin Muzaka, John Palati, Nicole Berisha, George Kuka, and Jin Maneshi. Skanderbeg sent an ambassador to the Sultan begging him to return his officers unharmed, or else he would execute his own prisoners of war. The Sultan was not moved, and refused to free them after being informed of their importance by Balaban. The Sultan ordered a 15-day torture, and the execution of the Albanian officers in which they were skinned alive, one by one. In our next episode of Skanderbeg's Rebellion, we will be covering the Second Siege of Kruja, led by the Sultan himself. To make sure you don't miss that, subscribe and press the bell button to be notified. This is the Medieval Chronicles channel, and we will see you in the next one.